Hello one, hello all, it's the most smash ghost of them all, Casper in the flesh, and it's time for a review of Richard Dawson, End of the Middle. Richard Dawson, singer, songwriter, instrumentalist. He's back with a brand new LP, a departure from his latest trajectory that he's put out from his speaking of poverty and the lengths that people go to survive, such as selling their children for grain, or 2020, which was pretty much a mirror of the circumstances we were living under. But with how old-timey Richard sounds, you kind of forget that it's spoken of the present time, but due to that, these are lingering effects and conditions that have been going on for a long time, not including the COVID virus, that was new. But in terms of like societal ills, in terms of harsh working conditions, unfair working conditions, it definitely was a mirroring of that. And I feel like on this LP, we semi-do get those themes again, but this one is more family-based. And of course, you also had the prog rock album, Henky, with the band Circle, which was an excellent one, very great storytelling, really does bring you to that medieval time and folklore without being corny. And then you have the Ruby Chord, which is honestly his most ambitious album yet, which honestly I felt was the weaker of the bunch. But that's not to say it wasn't great, because it was. I just wish it was trimmed down a bit more. Same with the first track. That could have been broken up into a myriad of tracks, but I digress. But now we have this project, and I feel Richard has brought something different to the table here, not only sonically, as this being his most sparse and most rawest recording yet, but also the thematic focus of family, of living under harsh conditions, poor working conditions, going through an existential crisis, while basically coming of age. But back to the quality of the record, like, this thing sounds so homespun and so personal. Like, I feel like Richard is right there in front of me, playing in front of me and singing right in front of me. Like, this thing is very tangible. I really should state, though, that I wasn't really won over by the opener. I really must say, though, I wasn't exactly won over by the opener of this 9-track album. And this thing is a little under an hour. But yeah, I felt like it was a bit too minimal, too sparse. Like, I really couldn't find anything engaging instrumentally at all. It's like the moment things are about to pick up, they just die down again and leave us on a cliffhanger. I will say, though, I do commend him for taking some risks here with the pounding drums, the string instrumentation, but I will say, like, the instrumentation is a little bit too ambient here. Like, there's really nothing else to support this. But I will say, though, that Richard, storytelling-wise, narratively, does have what it takes to pull me in. And in terms of writing, he mostly does that here. It's just, I feel like he builds suspense and then it just dies down again. It just goes flaccid. But vocally, though, he's not really pulling me in. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to have him scream his brains out or anything. It's just, I feel like his vocals are very subdued here, and it's not exactly keeping me engaged. It's not really keeping me interested. I guess I would want more variation. But again, I don't think the opener's terrible. I just think it's a weak track. Honestly, I think it's one of his weakest openers yet. And lyrically, I do think it sticks to the focus of family, as this family is sitting around in the house, and all of a sudden this drastic, unexplained thing happens where lightning bolt hits the house and everyone is in a panic, everyone is concerned of what's going on, and they feel there's this supernatural event going on. But I will say, though, and I won't spoil it, the ending is pretty lackluster in my opinion. It's like, given Richard's artistry, given his creativity, I just think he could have done a lot more. But Richard's epic galloping vocals are fantastic. I love the way he creates the coalescing of the percussion and the guitar on Gondola. That eventually leads to a set of instrumentation that culminates into a set of cymbal, light touches of organ, but still effective, along with some very warm, beautiful woodwinds. Lyrically, though, we do get the showing of this bittersweet sentiment. And as I mentioned before, with Richard's vocals, it definitely does sound like he's singing from ancient, old times, from like way back in the day, a bygone era, but still touching on relevancy, and the way he does it makes it feel like it's now, like, you know, it's vintage, but it does have a present feel to it, as this character is reflecting on vintage times, old times of watching Deal or No Deal, as what appears to be a delineation of speaking from the perspective of this family member who has let life pass her by, and seeing other people in her family succeed as she feels like her golden years are behind her now, reminiscing and also thinking of the quarrels she's had with her older brother Tom and the favoritism, but also having the acceptance of these missed opportunities and being supportive of the family members who are reaching their goals, succeeding, reaching accomplishments. So I will say, though, narratively, the song is kind of a downer, but I do think as the track progresses, you do get that sense of optimism, like it's not over. I still have years left. I'm gonna make the best of these last years. So it certainly has a hopeful tone to it. But the one that sticks out to me the most is the line, like, my dreams died like dolphins in a net. Holy fuck. And as you could tell, Richard is singing and writing from the perspective of other people. And on this track, Bully, he's actually singing from the perspective of two people here. A student and also a parent, and the student going through these very tumultuous times of being bullied, being hazed, being tormented, all suffering these traumatic events at school in one day. And throughout this record, you will notice these very periodic, impulsive shots of saxophone that are just blaring. They're just so raw. They're just so sparse, but also you could feel it. And each time this comes in, there's like a paradigm shift in concept or something to keep the story going. It's very much so a artistic tool and really does show sonic poeticism, in my opinion. And I think with how stripped back and minimalistic these tracks are, it really does create like a nice contrast here. It really does show a lot of personality, and I feel growth and emotion. And in this track in particular, I think the winding strings, the wailing sax really play off each other very nicely. And now we're getting into the perspective of the father who gets a phone call from the school. It's also very theatrical, and I feel like Richard does approach this track in a very funny, clever way. And this record does have a lot of endings that I won't give away, and I will continue not giving them away, but the ending is pretty unexpected, very much a twist here, which really does play into the innovation of Richard and his writing process that I just find very, very intriguing and very engaging. However, I do wish the question was more of a gratifying track, as this thing just comes off as very convoluted, very much a mess in my opinion, and goes on way too long, as we're getting the story of this ghost holding this head of this woman, and I feel like there's a lot of unnecessary moments here where this thing just comes off really long-winded, and the question is like, where are you going? The ghost is asking, where are you going? I mean, I got a question. Where is this track going? Boo! I know where you're going. Nowhere! Boo! Boo! Anyway, yeah, I just really think this track really does lose the narrative, and unfortunately not a highlight for me. Luckily though, we do get Boxing Day sales. And based off the names given here, there really is a connection and a correlation to the tracks we've heard previously, such as sibling conflict between this protagonist and Tom, and also including Ellie into the track as well, and what seems to be catching up, having an old acquaintance talk to her, strike up a conversation, just get an update, see how she's doing, all while we're getting the most massive, violent, chaotic hailstorm. And while catching up, the storm is getting worse, while simultaneously this person is sympathizing with her, saying, look, you've been through a lot, you deserve this, you should treat yourself, you deserve it. But yeah, leave it to Richard to make a very touching sentiment in the most chaotic circumstance. And the music here is so dense, it has such a bold presence, and the sax solo at the midpoint is completely unhinged. And I feel like the triumph, the poetic melodies really do bolster the feeling of this track, really do bolster the sentiment and theme. And even though I'm not head over heels for the instrumentation on Not, which is about a wedding going awry, and the reason being is just due to the fact that I don't really think Richard brings as much as a strong performance vocally, and it's a little bit too tedious. I think it takes way too much time to build up, and with a song this long, I would expect something more impactful, something that has more of a memorable melody to it. But to this track's credit, I do think he took a risk with putting on this very fuzzy, staticky, sonic element to the sax solo here. And I will say it ends not as strong as I'd like it to. A lot of these tracks have cliffhangers, but I can appreciate his knack for suspenseful storytelling. The song Polytunnel, sure, a low-key track, but I find to be a very interesting one. And I do think Richard does add more with the minimalistic soundscape he provides here, which is meditation on farming, planting, being a farmer, planting vegetables, finding happiness through it, only to find out our protagonist has no knowledge of this subject matter and Karen is the real hero. And it features a very beautiful, nice set of strings, a very serene set of strings, and some nice jovial melodies from Richard. And when it comes to the story, I do believe that we get more tie-ins to, we get more somewhat of a conclusion. And I feel we do have this moment where it's a meditation on how this family fell apart, as it shows the father being overworked, which is causing a reduction in taking care of the family, being attentive to the family, which leads to the dad absolutely losing it from being overworked at the car dealership, becoming more unnerved, and again, the saxophone simplifying the change, the paradigm shift that the story is taking. And of course, there is another surprise to be told here that I would rather have you figure out what that surprise is. And the closer, More Than Real, which is honestly the most synth-heaviest track here, which narratively plays the role of not repeating her father's mistakes. And this track is very ethereal, definitely an atmospheric journey with a lot of bright sax lines over this bubbling production. Like, the whole thing just feels otherworldly as we transition into this female singer, Sally Pickleton, as the next set of lyrics are very heartening, and as she's had this ominous feeling, this premonition that something has gone wrong, and she sensed it, which may be symbolic to the intro in some way, but I could be reaching with that one. But again, the lyrics are very heartening, they're very beautiful, and I feel the heavenly production ends things off very nicely. But yes, we are left with another cliffhanger as we don't know what happens to the father. What happened to the father? But yeah, I mean, I think the serenity and the beauty and the ethereal nature of the track really does fit the closing nature of the record. And overall, I think this is a new venture for Richard, sonically, narratively. And I feel he did a solid job here. Sure, I did think some of the parts of the record were convoluted. I do feel they meandered a bit too much. But I still think Richard brought some great storytelling here, new elements of existentialism, family, a coming-of-age record, which I found to be humorous at times, sweet at times, sad at times, and some beautiful sentiments. And even though I didn't love this record, I still think it's a decent one that Richard Dawson fans, or folk fans in general, should definitely check out. I'm feeling a 3.5 out of 5 on this record. If you've given this a listen, what did you think? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? And that's it. Caspa got the ghost. Richard Dawson. end in the middle. Why am I talking like this? Till we meet again.